The stars looked peaceful through the viewing window of the diplomatic shuttle. General Sarah Chen stood with her hands behind her back, watching the massive space station grow larger as they approached. She had made this trip dozens of times before. Always the same routine. Always boring. Always safe. That was about to change. Sarah was 42 years old and had spent 20 years in the human border fleet. She had short black hair with a few gray streaks, tired eyes, and 3 scars on her left arm from a training accident when she was young. Today she wore her dress uniform with all her medals. The blue fabric was pressed and clean. She looked like what she was, a professional soldier on a boring diplomatic mission. The Galactic Empire controlled almost half the known galaxy. 47 different alien species answered to the imperial court. Humans were considered a small species, unimportant. The Empire allowed humans to control a tiny sector of space near the outer rim. That was all. 1,000 years ago there had been a war. A terrible war. After it ended, both sides signed a peace treaty. For 10 centuries that treaty had held. Humans stayed in their corner of space. The Empire left them alone. Everyone was happy. Sarah's mission today was simple. She needed to discuss new trade routes with imperial officials. Some human colonies needed better access to imperial markets. Nothing exciting. Nothing dangerous. Her second-in-command, Commander James Rodriguez, walked up beside her. He was younger than Sarah, maybe 35, with dark skin and worried eyes. He always worried about something. "General, we're getting some odd readings on the scanner," James said quietly. Sarah turned to look at him. "What kind of readings?" "Ships, a lot of them. They're not showing imperial identification codes." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. She walked quickly to the bridge. The rest of her crew was already there, staring at their screens with confused faces. "Report," Sarah said sharply. The sensor officer, a young woman named Lisa Park, spoke without looking away from her screen. 27 ships, General. They just appeared from behind the station. They're surrounding us." Sarah looked at the tactical display. Green dots represented her small diplomatic shuttle and its 2 escort ships. Red dots surrounded them completely. There was no way out. "Hail them," Sarah ordered. Static filled the speakers. Then a voice spoke in perfect human English. The voice was smooth and cold. "Human vessel, you are now property of the Imperial Reclamation Fleet. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." Sarah's mind raced. The Imperial Reclamation Fleet was supposed to be a myth. Old stories said they were a rogue faction within the Empire. They claimed any ships in Imperial space as salvage if they wanted to. Most people thought they didn't really exist. "This is General Sarah Chen of the Human Coalition," she said clearly. "We are on a diplomatic mission. We have full authorization from the Imperial Court. You are in violation of the 1,000-year peace treaty." The voice laughed. It was not a nice laugh. "The treaty says humans may travel in Imperial space. It does not say we cannot claim abandoned vessels as salvage. We're not abandoned. We're right here. You will be classified as abandoned in approximately 10 minutes, General. After we destroy your escort ships and disable your shuttle, then you become salvage. Ancient Imperial law. Very legal." Sarah looked at James. His face was pale. She knew what he was thinking. They could try to fight, but 27 ships against 3 small vessels? It would be suicide. It would also be pointless. Her crew would die for nothing. "Stand down," Sarah said quietly to her crew. "Do not fire." That's an order. The next few hours were a blur. The rogue Imperial ships destroyed her escort vessels quickly. The crews didn't have time to escape. Sarah watched 30 good men and women die on her tactical display. Her shuttle was disabled by an electromagnetic pulse. Then the boarding parties came. Sarah and her surviving crew were taken to the flagship of the rogue fleet. They were put in holding cells. The cells were clean but small. Through the walls, Sarah could hear her crew members in other cells. Some were crying. Some were silent. 3 days passed. Then Sarah was taken from her cell and brought to a large room. A tall alien stood there. He had gray skin, 4 arms, and coal black eyes. He wore expensive robes that marked him as someone important. "General Chen," the alien said, "I am Magistrate Velos. I have wonderful news. You have been officially declared salvage by the Imperial Reclamation Court. You and your crew will be auctioned at the Grand Auction House on the capital world." Sarah stared at him. "Auctioned? Like property?" "Exactly like property," Velos smiled. It was a terrible smile. "You should feel honored. Humans are quite rare in the Empire. I expect you will sell for a very high price. A general is a unique item. Sarah kept her face calm. Inside, her mind was working fast. This was more than just a crime. This was an insult. The worst kind of insult. The Empire was treating her like an object to be bought and sold. They were treating her like a slave. My government will respond to this, Sarah said carefully. Velos laughed. Your government? What will they do? Humans are a small species with a small fleet. The Empire has thousands of ships. Your people will complain. They will make angry speeches. Then they will do nothing. They always do nothing. He turned to leave, then looked back at her. The auction is in 72 hours. I suggest you rest. You'll want to look presentable for the bidders. After he left, Sarah sat down on the floor of her cell. She closed her eyes and thought about everything she knew. The Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had forgotten their history. They had forgotten the war. Sarah smiled grimly. They were about to remember. Back on Earth in the Human Coalition headquarters, alarms were ringing. News of Sarah's capture had reached the government. Emergency sessions were being called. Admirals were rushing to war rooms. And somewhere deep in space, in places the Empire had never found, ancient shipyards were powering up for the first time in centuries. The countdown had begun. Admiral Marcus Webb was 107 years old. He sat in his small apartment on Mars drinking coffee and watching the news on his screen. When the report about General Chen came on, his coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. They had done it. The Empire had actually done it. Marcus remembered the war. He had been a young man then, barely 25. He remembered when the Empire first came to Earth. They had been so confident, so sure of themselves. They called it integration. Humans called it invasion. The Empire thought humans would surrender quickly. Pre-FTL species always did. But Earth didn't surrender. Earth fought back with everything it had. Nuclear weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons. Tactics so brutal that the Empire's soldiers started having mental breakdowns. Marcus remembered the Battle of Luna. Imperial ships surrounded Earth's moon. They demanded surrender. Instead, humans rigged the entire mining colony to explode. 3,000 human miners died. They took 12 Imperial ships with them. After that, the Empire started to understand. Humans didn't surrender, ever. The war lasted 5 years. Millions died on both sides. The Empire won most of the battles, but every battle cost them more than they expected. Human ships were weaker, but they'd ram Imperial vessels if they ran out of ammunition. Human soldiers were smaller, but they'd fight until every single one was dead. By the end, both sides were exhausted. The Empire controlled Earth's orbit, but they couldn't control the surface. Humans still fought in the cities, in the mountains, in the deserts. The Empire realized they could kill every human, but it would take decades, and the cost would be enormous, so they made peace, a real peace, a treaty that said humans could have their own space. The Empire would leave them alone. Everyone would forget the war and move forward, but the Empire forgot something important. Humans never forgot. Marcus turned off his screen and made a phone call. The person who answered was another old veteran. They spoke for 30 seconds. Then that person made another call. Then another. All across human space, old soldiers were getting phone calls. All of them said the same thing. It's time. On Earth, in a bunker deep beneath the Swiss mountains, President Helen Okafor sat at a large table. Around her sat the heads of every human government, every military branch, every intelligence agency. The room was silent. They auctioned our general, Helen said quietly. They're treating her like property, like a thing to be bought and sold. General Thomas Hunt, the oldest military officer still on active duty, leaned forward. He was 90 years old with white hair and cold blue eyes. We issued the ultimatum? Yes. 72 hours to return General Chen unharmed. The Empire's response came 30 minutes ago. Helen touched a button. A holographic image appeared above the table. It showed an Imperial official with a smug face. They said, and I quote, "The matter is an internal Imperial legal issue. Humans have no authority to make demands of the Empire. This conversation is over." Someone at the table cursed. Someone else hit the table with their fist. Thomas stood up slowly. "I recommend we activate Protocol Omega." Everyone in the room turned to look at him. Protocol Omega was a secret, one of humanity's deepest secrets. For 1,000 years, every human government had kept it hidden, even from their own people. Helen took a deep breath. "All in favor?" Every hand in the room went up. Then it's decided, Helen said. She pressed a red button on the table. Activate Protocol Omega. Launch Code Authorization Omega 77 Alpha. Across human space, secret orders were sent. On the dark side of Earth's moon, a mountain opened up. It wasn't a real mountain. It was a door. Behind that door were shipyards. Massive shipyards that had been building ships for 1,000 years. Behind the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, inside hollowed-out asteroids, more doors opened. Hundreds of ships emerged. Ships that didn't exist in any official records. Ships that had been waiting in the darkness. In orbit around Titan, one of Saturn's moons, a whole fleet uncloaked. 200 warships. They had been there for centuries, running silent, waiting for this day. The border fleet that everyone knew about was never humanity's real military. It was a police force. A tripwire. The real human armada had been hiding and growing for 1,000 years. Every year, more ships were built. Every year, more weapons were stockpiled. Every year, humans trained for a war they hoped would never come, but they were ready if it did. On the imperial capital world, Magistrate Velos was very pleased with himself. The auction was tomorrow. Already bids for the human general were incredibly high. Wealthy collectors from across the empire wanted to own such a rare prize. Velos would get a large commission. He would be rich and famous. His assistant rushed into the room. The young alien looked terrified. Magistrate, we have a problem. What problem? Velos asked, annoyed. Long-range sensors are detecting ships. Human ships. Thousands of them. Velos laughed. Impossible. Humans have maybe 200 ships total. Our intelligence is very clear about this. The assistant pulled up a holographic display. Red dots filled the screen. Hundreds of red dots. Thousands of red dots. All moving toward Imperial space. Velos stopped laughing. That's impossible. Where did they all come from? We don't know, Magistrate. They're coming from everywhere. From behind their moon. From their asteroid belt. From deep space. It's like they were hiding them. Velos felt cold fear creep up his spine. He pulled up the historical files about the human war. He had never bothered to read them before. Humans were weak. Everyone knew that, but as he read, his hands started shaking. The reports were clear. Humans were small and weak compared to other species, but they fought differently. They fought with creativity, with desperation, with a complete refusal to accept defeat. The old Imperial veterans had written warnings in the files. Never underestimate humans. Never corner them. Never give them a reason to go to war. Velos had given them a reason. In her cell, Sarah Chen sat calmly. She had received a coded message from her crew. One of them had managed to smuggle in a small communication device. The message was short. Protocol Omega activated. Help is coming, Sarah smiled. She had known it would come to this. The Empire had broken the treaty in the worst possible way. Now they would learn why the treaty existed in the first place. The Empire had spent 1,000 years in peace. They had grown soft, comfortable. They had forgotten what war really meant. Humans had spent 1,000 years preparing. Just in case, a guard walked past Sarah's cell. The auction is tomorrow, human. I hope you're excited. Sarah looked at him calmly. There's not going to be an auction. The guard laughed and walked away. Sarah closed her eyes and waited. Soon her people would come for her, and after that the Empire would face something they had forgotten about, something they thought they'd never see again. The fury of humanity. The 72-hour deadline expired at exactly midnight, Earth Standard Time. The human armada didn't wait even 1 second longer. Across 37 Imperial systems, human ships appeared without warning. They came out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, already firing. Imperial communication stations were the first targets. One moment they were broadcasting normally. The next moment they were clouds of debris. The Empire's military command tried to coordinate a response, but their communication network was gone. Admirals couldn't talk to their fleets. Fleets couldn't talk to each other. The Empire was blind and deaf. On the bridge of the human battleship Revenge, Admiral Thomas Hunt watched the tactical display. Ships marked in green were his forces. Red dots were Imperial ships. The red dots were scrambling, confused, trying to figure out what was happening. All ships commence Phase 2, Thomas said calmly into his microphone. Target supply depots and repair stations. Nothing else. Minimal casualties. Across the battlefield, human ships moved with perfect precision. They had practiced this for 1,000 years. Every captain knew exactly what to do. Missile strikes hit fuel storage facilities. Railgun rounds destroyed repair docks. In less than an hour, the Empire's ability to support their fleet in this sector was crippled. But Thomas made sure to target only military infrastructure. Civilian stations were left untouched. Cities were not bombed. Humans weren't here to commit genocide. They were here to send a message. On the Imperial capital world, the Grand Council met an emergency session. Hundreds of alien officials shouted at each other. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight to the last ship. Most were simply terrified. High Chancellor Zen stood at the center of the chamber. She was an old alien with silver skin and wise eyes. She had been alive during the last war. Unlike the younger officials, she remembered what humans could do. Silence, she shouted. The chamber went quiet. We made a terrible mistake. We broke the treaty. We insulted them in the worst possible way. Now we must deal with the consequences. A younger official stood up. But Chancellor, humans only had 200 ships. How do they suddenly have thousands? Zen looked at him with sad eyes. They were hiding them, you fool. For 1,000 years they were building and waiting. The border fleet we knew about was never their real military. It was a test, a way to see if we would keep the peace. We failed the test. What do we do? Another official asked. We pray they show mercy, Zen said quietly, because if they decide to fight like they did before, we will lose. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but eventually, we will lose. In orbit around the Imperial prison station where Sarah Chen was being held, space suddenly filled with human ships. 12 vessels, all painted black, all running silent until the last moment. They were special operations ships, designed for exactly this kind of mission. The station's commander panicked. He had 40 guards and no weapons capable of fighting warships. He tried to call for help, but the communications were dead. He was alone. A message came through on the emergency channel. A human voice, calm and cold. Release General Sarah Chen and all her crew immediately. You have 5 minutes. After that, we will board your station by force. The commander looked at his guards. Most of them were already putting down their weapons. They weren't stupid. They weren't going to die for this. Release the prisoners, the commander said quietly. Sarah walked out of her cell with her head held high. Her crew was waiting in the corridor. Some of them were injured. All of them were angry. A young ensign, barely 20 years old, had tears running down her face. It's okay, Sarah said gently. We're going home. The human special forces team met them at the docking port. The team leader, a woman with cold eyes and heavy weapons, saluted Sarah. General Chen, we're here to take you home. What's the situation? Sarah asked. We're at war, ma'am. Orders are to extract you and return you to the fleet. You're needed. Sarah looked back at the Imperial guards. They stood with their hands raised, terrified. She could order them killed. It would be easy. They had kept her in a cell for days. They had been planning to auction her like property. But Sarah was a soldier, not a murderer. Let them go, Sarah said. They were following orders. This isn't their fault. The Special Forces team looked surprised but nodded. Within minutes, Sarah and her crew were on a human ship jumping to faster-than-light speed. Behind them, the prison station was left intact. Another message to the Empire. Humans were angry, but they were not barbarians. The news of Sarah's rescue spread across the galaxy at incredible speed. The Empire had broadcast the auction plans widely. They wanted everyone to see their power over humans. Now everyone was seeing something different. They were seeing humans extract their general from the heart of Imperial space. They were seeing the Empire powerless to stop them. Fear spread through Imperial territory. If humans could do this, what else could they do? On various colony worlds, alien species that were part of the Empire started asking questions. If the Empire couldn't protect itself, why should these species stay loyal? Secret communications were sent to human ambassadors. Some species wanted to negotiate. Others wanted protection. A few wanted to join humanity's side. The Empire was fracturing. Sarah arrived at the human fleet's main staging area 3 days after her rescue. She walked onto the bridge of the flagship Vengeance, and every officer stood to attention. Admiral Thomas Hunt smiled at her. It was a tired smile. General Chen, good to see you safe. Admiral Hunt, request permission to return to duty. Permission granted. We need every experienced officer we have. Thomas gestured to the tactical display. The Empire is trying to organize a counterattack. Intelligence suggests they're gathering a massive fleet. Their target is Earth. Sarah looked at the display. Red dots were gathering in a nearby system. Hundreds of ships. Maybe thousands. The Empire was throwing everything they had at humanity's homeworld. They thought humans would panic. They thought humans would rush to defend Earth and leave themselves exposed. They were wrong. Sarah smiled. They're falling into the trap. Thomas nodded. Yes. The solar system is the most heavily defended place in human space. We've had 1,000 years to prepare defenses. If they attack Earth, they'll walk into a meat grinder. And while they're committed to the attack, Sarah asked, we'll cut off their retreat and destroy them completely. Thomas touched a button. New green dots appeared on the display, showing human ships moving into position. It'll be the largest space battle in galactic history. And it'll be the last one. After this, the Empire will have no choice but to negotiate. Sarah took a deep breath. She didn't want this war. Nobody did. But the Empire had forced their hand. Now humanity would finish what the Empire started. When do we move? Sarah asked. The Imperial fleet will reach Earth in 48 hours. We'll let them commit fully to the attack. Then we spring the trap. Thomas looked at Sarah. I'm giving you command of the 3rd battle group. 50 ships. Your job is to cut off their escape route. Sarah saluted. Yes, sir. They won't escape. As Sarah left to take command of her new battle group, she thought about everything that had led to this moment. One auction, one insult, one moment of imperial arrogance. That was all it took to end 1,000 years of peace. The Empire was about to learn a hard lesson. Humans were patient. Humans preferred peace. But when pushed too far, humans would remind the galaxy why they survived long enough to reach the stars. The final battle was coming. The Imperial fleet arrived at Earth with more than 2,000 warships. It was the largest military force the Empire had assembled in 500 years. Surely, the Imperial admirals thought, this would be enough to crush human resistance. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Admiral Krath commanded the Imperial fleet from his massive flagship. He was confident, arrogant even. He had studied the reports about human military strength. 200 ships, maybe 300 if humans had hidden reserves. His fleet was 10 times larger. All ships advance toward the 3rd planet, Krath ordered. Target all military installations. Once we control their homeworld, the rest of human space will surrender. The Imperial fleet moved forward in a wall of metal and firepower. Sensors detected human ships near Earth, only about 100 vessels. Even better than expected. Then the trap was sprung. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter suddenly came alive with weapons fire. Hundreds of hidden platforms emerged from the rocks. Railguns, missiles, energy weapons. The first wave of Imperial ships died before they even understood what was happening. Defensive formations, Krath shouted. But it was too late. The Imperial fleet was already inside the killing zone. From Earth's moon, massive defense stations uncloaked. Each station was the size of a small city covered in weapons. They opened fire in perfect synchronization. The Imperial fleet's right flank collapsed under the assault. Behind them, human ships appeared from faster-than-light travel. Fresh forces, perfectly positioned to cut off the retreat. Admiral Sarah Chen's 3rd battle group emerged directly behind the Imperial fleet. On her ship's bridge, Sarah watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. All ships weapons free. Target their engines first. Don't let any of them escape. The Battle of Sol, as it would later be called, lasted for 18 hours. It was brutal. It was one-sided. The Imperial fleet had walked into a trap that humanity had spent 1,000 years preparing. Krath watched his fleet die around him. Ships exploded. Escape pods fled in every direction. His communications officer reported that 70% of the fleet was destroyed or disabled. The rest were trying to surrender. How? Krath whispered to himself. How did they have so many weapons? So many ships? The answer was simple. Humans had never stopped preparing for war. While the Empire grew comfortable and soft, humans built weapons. While the Empire forgot its history, humans remembered. Every single day for 1,000 years, humans asked themselves, what if the Empire comes back? Now the Empire had come back, and they were paying the price. Krath's flagship was crippled. Half his crew was dead. He had no choice. "Signal our surrender," he said quietly. But the war wasn't over yet. In the Imperial capital system, High Chancellor Zen received reports of the disaster at Earth. 2,000 ships lost. The Empire's largest fleet in centuries destroyed in less than a day. She felt sick. Younger members of the council were shouting for revenge, for escalation, for total war against humanity, you fools. Zen shouted at them. Don't you understand what just happened? We attacked their homeworld with everything we had. They crushed us. If we escalate, they won't just defend anymore. They'll attack us. Let them try, a young admiral yelled. We have thousands more ships. And they have weapons we never knew existed. Zen's voice was desperate now. They've been preparing for this war for 1,000 years. We stopped preparing after the treaty was signed. We have more ships, yes, but they have better tactics, better technology, better training. And most importantly, they have motivation. We insulted them. We made them angry. And an angry human is the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. The council chamber fell silent. Then a message came through. It was from the Human Coalition government. President Helen Okafor appeared on the holographic display. Her face was calm, but her eyes were hard. People of the Galactic Empire, Helen said, your fleet attacked our homeworld. It has been destroyed. You have 3 options now. 1. Continue this war until we are forced to attack your homeworld. 2. Surrender unconditionally. 3. Negotiate a new treaty. You have 24 hours to decide. The hologram disappeared. One of the council members laughed nervously. She can't be serious. Attack our capital? That's impossible. We have the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. Zen looked at him with tired eyes. So did they. How did that work out? While the Empire debated, human forces were moving. Battle groups spread across Imperial space not to conquer but to demonstrate power. Human ships appeared in systems, destroyed military targets, then left before Imperial forces could respond. Psychological warfare teams broadcast messages in every language spoken in the Empire. The messages were simple and terrifying. We did not want this war. You forced it upon us. We have shown you we can reach your homeworld. We have shown you we can destroy your fleets. Surrender now while you still can. The messages worked. Panic spread across Imperial space. Civilian populations demanded their governments negotiate peace. Military units started defecting or simply refusing to fight. Several smaller species within the Empire sent secret messages to human forces, offering to switch sides if humans would protect them. The Empire was collapsing from within. On the human flagship Vengeance, Admiral Thomas Hunt and General Sarah Chen met with their senior staff. The holographic display showed the entire galactic situation. Green zones were under human control. Red zones were still Imperial. The red zones were shrinking every hour. We've won, one of the junior officers said. The Empire is falling apart. We should press our advantage and take their capital. Sarah shook her head. We didn't start this war to become conquerors. We started it to get justice and ensure this never happens again. Thomas agreed. The goal was never to destroy the Empire. It was to make them respect us. I think we've accomplished that. But what about Magistrate Velos? Another officer asked. The one who captured General Chen and organized the auction? Sarah's expression turned cold. He and everyone involved in my capture will face human justice. That's non-negotiable. A message came through from Imperial High Chancellor Zen. She was requesting an emergency meeting to discuss peace terms. Thomas and Sarah exchanged looks. Set up the meeting, Thomas said, but tell them it happens on our terms in a neutral location. And tell them General Chen will be leading the human delegation. Sarah smiled grimly. I think that's appropriate. 24 hours later, on a neutral space station, the peace talks began. Sarah Chen walked into the conference room wearing her full military uniform. Every medal, every ribbon. She looked exactly like what she was, a warrior who had won her war. High Chancellor Zen was already there, along with a dozen other Imperial officials. Many of them looked afraid. Good, Sarah thought. They should be afraid. Chancellor Zen, Sarah said formally. Shall we begin? Zen nodded. She looked old and tired. General Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Empire, I offer our formal surrender. The words hung in the air. Several Imperial officials looked like they wanted to protest but stayed silent. They knew the truth. The war was over. The Empire had lost. The terms of surrender are as follows, Sarah began. She listed them one by one. Reparations for the families of the crew members who died when her escorts were destroyed. Territory concessions. Recognition of human sovereignty. Most importantly, everyone involved in her capture would be handed over to face trial in human courts. Zen listened to it all. Some of the terms were harsh, but they weren't genocidal. Humans weren't demanding the destruction of the Empire. They just wanted respect and justice. These terms are acceptable, Zen said finally. But I have a question, General Chen. Yes? Why didn't you destroy us completely? You had the power. You had the justification. Why show mercy? Sarah looked at the old chancellor for a long moment. Because we remember what war costs. We remember the millions who died in the last war. We didn't want this war, Chancellor. You forced it on us. But now that it's over, we have a choice. We can be monsters or we can be better than that. We choose to be better. Zen's eyes were wet. Thank you, General. I hope my people learn from this. I hope so too, Sarah said. Because if we have to teach this lesson again, we won't be so merciful. The treaty was signed that day. The war that lasted 3 months ended not with the destruction of the Empire, but with a new understanding. Humans were not weak. Humans were not to be insulted. And most importantly, humans kept their promises. They promised peace for 1,000 years. They kept that promise. But when the Empire broke it, humans promised war. They kept that promise too. 50 years had passed since the war ended. Sarah Chen was 92 years old now. Her hair was completely white. Her face was lined with wrinkles, but her eyes were still sharp and clear. She stood at the dedication ceremony for the memorial. It was being built on a small moon orbiting a neutral star system. Representatives from both human and imperial governments were there. So were thousands of civilians from dozens of species. The memorial was a massive structure made of black stone. On it were carved the names of everyone who died in the war. Human names and alien names side by side, soldiers and civilians, the guilty and the innocent. Sarah walked slowly to the podium. Her joints hurt these days, but she refused to use a walking stick. She was a soldier. Soldiers didn't show weakness. 50 years ago, Sarah began, her voice still strong despite her age. The 1,000-year peace ended, not because of grand political reasons, not because of territory or resources. It ended because of arrogance and insult. The Empire treated me and my crew as property. They forgot that we were people with dignity and rights. She paused, looking at the crowd. There were young people there, children who were born after the war. They would inherit the galaxy that Sarah's generation had shaped. The war lasted 3 months. In that time, 4 million beings died. Most of them were Imperial citizens. Their only crime was being part of a government that made terrible decisions. I think about them often. I think about the Imperial soldiers who died at Earth, who were just following orders. I think about the families they left behind. An Imperial representative in the audience wiped tears from her eyes. Sarah had met her before. Her father had died at the Battle of Sol. After the war ended, we wrote a new treaty, Sarah continued. Not a treaty between superior and inferior, but between equals. The Empire recognized human sovereignty completely. They paid reparations to the families of those who died. And they handed over everyone responsible for my capture to face justice. That had been the hardest part. Magistrate Velos and 47 other Imperial officials were tried in human courts. Most received long prison sentences. 3 were executed for the murder of Sarah's escort crews. The executions were controversial, but Sarah had insisted. Actions had consequences. But the new treaty included something else, Sarah said. Something more important than reparations or territory. It included protection clauses. No species under Imperial authority could be bought, sold, or treated as property. Any government that engaged in such practices would face immediate sanctions. The Empire agreed. Other major powers agreed. The treaty became galactic law. That was Sarah's proudest achievement. The war had been terrible, but at least something good came from it. Slavery in all its forms was now illegal across most of the galaxy. Trillions of beings had better lives because of it. The war also changed humanity's place in the galaxy. Sarah continued. Before we were seen as a minor species, weak, unimportant. After the war, we became one of the major powers. Today, humanity sits on the Galactic Council as an equal partner with the Empire and other great civilizations. That transformation hadn't been easy. Suddenly being a major power meant new responsibilities. Humans had to help mediate disputes between other species. They had to contribute to galactic peacekeeping forces. They had to be leaders, not just survivors. But humanity rose to the challenge. Human diplomats became known for being fair but firm. Human technology, kept secret for so long, was now shared with trusted allies. Human military tactics were studied in academies across the galaxy. Some people call the war a victory, Sarah said, her voice growing softer. I disagree. War is never a victory. War is always a tragedy. Yes, we achieved our goals. Yes, we protected our dignity and secured our place in the galaxy. But millions died. Families were destroyed. Scars were left that will take generations to heal. She gestured to the memorial behind her. This monument isn't here to celebrate victory. It's here to remember cost. Every name carved in this stone represents a life cut short, a future stolen, a family left incomplete. We must never forget that cost. Because if we forget, we might be tempted to go to war again. The crowd was silent. Some were crying openly now. Others stared at the ground. Everyone understood the weight of Sarah's words. I'm an old woman now, Sarah said with a slight smile. I probably won't live to see too many more years. But I want to leave you with one final thought. Peace is not automatic. Peace is not guaranteed. Peace is a choice we make every single day. For 1,000 years before the war, humans and the Empire chose peace. Then someone made a different choice, and millions died. She looked directly at the young people in the crowd. You are the future. You will lead governments, command ships, and make decisions that affect billions of lives. When you face difficult choices, when someone insults you or threatens you, remember this memorial. Remember the cost. Choose peace when you can, but if you cannot, if someone forces war upon you, fight with everything you have. Then when you win, be merciful. Be better than your enemy. Sarah stepped away from the podium. The crowd applauded, but it was subdued. This wasn't a celebration. It was a moment of reflection. After the ceremony, Sarah walked through the memorial gardens with her old friend, Admiral Thomas Hunt. He was 107 now, ancient by any standard. They moved slowly, two old soldiers taking one last walk together. Do you think it will last? Thomas asked. The peace? Sarah thought about it. I don't know, I hope so. But hope isn't enough. Every generation has to choose peace. Our generation learned that lesson the hard way. Maybe it'll stick. The Empire has changed, Thomas observed. Chancellor Zen retired 20 years ago, but her reforms are still in place. They're more democratic now, more careful about respecting other species. Good, Sarah said. Maybe something good came from all the death after all. They reached a bench and sat down. Sarah's legs were grateful for the rest. In the distance, they could see human and Imperial children playing together. That sight would have been impossible 50 years ago. I got a message from the new Imperial High Chancellor, Sarah said. She wants to meet with me before I die. Says she wants to hear my story directly, not from history books. Will you do it? I think so. She needs to understand what happened. Not the military details, but the human side. She needs to know that we didn't want war, that we tried everything to avoid it. But when pushed too far, we pushed back harder than anyone expected. Thomas smiled. You know what I think? I think the Empire learned that humans are dangerous, not because we have big ships or powerful weapons, but because we remember. We remember insults. We remember injustice. And we never ever forget our friends or our enemies. Sarah nodded. That's both our strength and our danger. We have long memories. We hold grudges. But we also keep our promises. The Empire promised peace for 1,000 years. We kept our side. They broke their promise, so we reminded them why the promise existed in the first place. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the memorial. Two old warriors at the end of their lives reflecting on a war that shaped the galaxy. Do you have any regrets? Thomas asked finally. Sarah thought carefully. I regret the lives lost. I regret that war was necessary. But I don't regret how we fought it. We could have destroyed the Empire completely. We could have slaughtered billions in revenge. But we chose restraint. We chose mercy. I'm proud of that. So am I, Thomas said softly. Years later, after both Sarah and Thomas had passed away, historians would debate the war endlessly. Some called it humanity's greatest victory. Others called it a tragedy that should have been avoided. Most agreed it was both. The war proved several things to the galaxy. It proved that humans were not weak. It proved that patience should not be mistaken for cowardice. It proved that humans could be terrible enemies but generous victors. Most importantly, it proved that peace was precious. The 1,000-year peace before the war became legendary. Parents told their children about it. Teachers taught it in schools. For 1,000 years they chose peace, the stories would say. Then someone chose war. Look at what happened. The new treaty held. 50 years became 100. 100 became 200. Humanity and the Empire never fought again. They became close allies, trading partners, even friends. The scars of the war faded, though they never completely disappeared. On Earth, in a museum dedicated to the war, Sarah Chen's uniform was displayed behind glass. Visitors would stop and read the plaque. General Sarah Chen, captured by the Empire. Rescued by her people. Led humanity to victory, chose mercy over vengeance. Remembered the cost of war. Next to her uniform was a simple quote, her own words from the memorial dedication. Peace is a choice we make every single day. Choose wisely. The galaxy learned its lesson. Humans were patient. Humans would endure peace for 1,000 years if you let them. They would work hard, build their civilizations, raise their children, and be good neighbors. But if you insulted them, if you treated them as less than people, if you forced them to fight, they would remind you why they survived long enough to reach the stars in the first place. They would remind you that humans never forgot, and they never forgave.